We've all been there. You've just got done watching a super cool build guide, and then you go to the PoB to look at the gear, and suddenly the budding excitement turns into existential dread as you realize the gear is far nicer than anything you've ever made before. Today, we're going to go over the best ways to craft double influence gear that are currently known for Ritual League. To start off, let me introduce you to my favorite crafting tool, Craft of Exile. This is a free website that allows you to not only research crafting, but even practice crafting as well. This can be incredibly useful because it allows you to try out the process without ruining your items or wasting your currency. Let's start off by trying to craft an awesome pair of gloves for my Lancing Steel Champion build. Looking at the PoB gloves, we can see we're using a pair of Sinestral gloves that have both Hunter and Warlord influences on them. Since these only have evasion on them, we know that this is a dex base. First thing we're going to do is open up Craft of Exile and then choose our base type as gloves, and then click on the dex variant of gloves. Next, let's add our influences to the glove by clicking the plus sign over here. Once for Hunter and then again for Warlord. Next, let's set the mods we want on our gloves. Scrolling down, we can see that the list of mods that are available are divided by prefix and suffix. Clicking on a mod such as Life will reveal all the different tiers of that mod which are available, their required item level, and their weight. Mods that have more than one tier have values that increase in strength as you go down in tier number and up in required item level. We can see here that Tier 1 Life requires item level 54 and has a weight of 1000, similar to all of the other tiers of Life. That means that the tiers aren't weighted at all, and you're just as likely to get Tier 1 Life as you are Tier 9. Let's left click on Tier 3 to say I want this mod on my item, to tell the site to give us the odds of getting this mod or any of its better tiers. Scrolling back up to crafting method, we can click on Chaos Orb and it'll show us the odds of getting this craft, which without getting to the math too much is going to be about 8 Chaos Orbs to hit this, and that's not that bad. Now let's add the rest of our prefixes though and see what happens to those odds. Scrolling back down, we'll select the Warlord's projectile attack damage and the Hunter's chance to impale. These are the highest tiers of these mods that we can get without using a Maven's Orb. Scrolling back up, you'll see the odds have gotten a lot worse. Like, a lot worse. 72,940 Chaos Orbs is about 2 mirrors. That's a staggeringly large amount of money for some of the gloves. But let's show you how we're going to get even better gloves than these for much less money. Let's start off with talking about the 2 big ticket orbs that are used in this type of crafting. First, the Awakener's Orb drops exclusively from Cirrus, and the Maven's Orb, which drops exclusively from the Maven. The Maven's Orb can be used on any item that has 2 influence mods, and it will remove one of the mods while elevating the other. Elevating will raise a mod's tier, such as from Tier 2 to Tier 1. However, when elevating a Tier 1 mod, the Maven's Orb will raise it to a new elevated mod, which sometimes has new or special properties, such as the flat damage per impale on an enemy on the Hunter's Impale mod on gloves. You can identify these in-game with the advanced tooltip because they'll be listed as elevated. These count as influence mods for other forms of crafting, however the only way to add them to an item is through a Maven or Awakener's Orb. The Awakener's Orb, on the other hand, is used on 2 items that each have an influence. Typically, you'll want to use 2 items that each have an influence mod that you'll want to keep. The first item you click after clicking the orb will be destroyed, and its influence will be added to the second item. The finished item will have the base, item level, quality, and enchant of the second item, and it will also have 1 influence mod from each of the 2 original items. Note that if either of the original items had more than 1 influence mod, it'll pick one of these at random. The finished item will have a total of somewhere between 4 and 6 mods, just like if you happen to use a Chaos Orb on a rare. Using these orbs, we're going to make an amazing pair of gloves relatively easily. Since we only need to get one of these influence mods per item, let's see the odds of hitting Tier 1 Impale with Chaos Orbs. Looks to be about 42 Chaos. Likewise, it's 44 chaos to hit the projectile damage on a pair of Warlord's gloves. You may also notice that while elevated impale is giving us flat damage per impale, the Warlord's mod is only giving us a small increase in projectile damage. So you may choose to skip elevating this mod if you don't have a way to get it for cheap. Speaking of cheap, the next step is to hit the trade site to see if anyone has already crafted something that we can use as a crafting base. We're going to search for gloves, which are non-unique and are not corrupted. Next, we'll add the projectile attack damage mod and the damage per impale mod. Then click this little pencil here and make this a count search and set this count to 1. This means it'll return any items that have at least one of these mods. Right away, we can see that there are a few projectile attack damage mods up for cheap, although this might change if you search today. Scrolling down through this, you can see that while there are a few impale gloves, they're kind of expensive. Due to the way Maven's orbs work, the average cost of an elevated mod should be about 2 Maven's orbs, or about 14 exalts in today's economy. If you hate Maven's orb gambling, you may want to buy one of these, but I like to self-craft. So let's pretend we've purchased one of these projectile gloves, and let's go craft our impale gloves. Going back to CoE, we're going to open up a tab with the emulator. This is an awesome tool that lets us pretend to craft. Once again, we're going to go through the prompts to get the type of glove that we want, and we're going to select the Sinestral Gloves base type. Now, we need to set the item level as well. For the most part, item level 84 or 86 is the standard crafting item level, but we need to check to make sure the mods we want can be hit in that range. Luckily for us, the Impale mod only needs item level 80, however, resistances want at least item level 84 for their tier 1 rolls. Expanding the mod tiers for res, you'll see that they have breakpoints for item level 72 and 84 for elemental res, while chaos res is 65 and 81. So ideally, you'd want to use item level 84, but in the worst case, 81 would be okay. Back to the emulator, we're going to pick item level 84 and no influence and proceed. From here, we basically have a full crafting experience. I'll click on a alchemy and then get started by just left clicking on the item. As you can see, they now have mods, and we can see a history of what we've done, and as well as a running total of which orbs we've used, and as well as the total cost. Now we need to add Hunter's Influence to the item. Since whenever you use a Conqueror's Exalt, you're going to be guaranteed one of their mods. First, let's fill up the suffixes while having an open prefix. We can either do this by getting lucky on our alchemy, or by chaos orbing, or by chaos orbing something that's going to have 2 prefixes and 2 suffixes, and we just craft a 3rd suffix to fill the item up. Once we're ready, we can hit the item with a Hunter's Exalt. As you can see, it now has a Hunter's mod on it, but not the one we want. So let's chaos spam until we hit it. Eventually we land on a tier 1 impale mod, and if you're really lucky, you'll already have another hunter's mod on your gloves as well. If you do, you can just skip to the next step. Since I don't have a second hunter's mod, I'm going to have to add another hunter's mod to this item through harvest crafting. Looking at the mod list again, we can see that hunter's suffixes have several mods that are relatively easy mod tags. If your gloves are full on prefixes, you can easily use an AUG Fizz craft to guarantee hitting Fizz damage over time. If you have either fire, cold, or chaos res, you could use the corresponding augments to add their damage over time influence mod as well. Regardless of how you go do this, you need to have 2 influence mods if you want to use a Maven's Orb. Next step is simple. Hit the gloves with a Maven's Orb and pray that the 50-50 works out in your favor. Although this may seem like an extremely expensive method, just keep in mind that the odds of chaos orbing a good pair of gloves with the mods that we want is like an astronomical cost compared to what we'll be spending here. If you get lucky, you can just move on with the next step. And if you don't, it's either time to sell off your gloves if you hit a elevated second mod, or time to re-roll and just start from scratch again. Once you have your elevated gloves, it's time to use an Awakener's Orb. As you remember, we're going to click on the item we want to destroy first, and then the item whose base we want to save second. To do this in Craft of Exile, we need to quickly create the projectile glove in another emulator and then export. When we click the Awakener's Orb in our first emulator tab, it'll give us a spot to paste the data in for the other glove. Pasting this information and then clicking Awaken will create our new dual influence gloves. You notice the item now has the 2 influence mods we were looking for and a bunch of other mods. If you got really lucky, you might even have some other good mods. Odds are though, you're going to need to clean up these gloves with some harvest crafting. In a good scenario, you'll have your 2 prefixes and maybe a good life roll, or you'll just have 2 prefixes and 2 other mods that are easy to remove due to them having mod tags that are not physical or attack. Our finished gloves want life, our 2 influence mods, a res, attack speed, and the crafted mod avoid elemental ailments. The next step in crafting kind of depends on what's the status of your 3rd prefix. If you have life or no 3rd prefix, this is likely the best and you can proceed to working on your suffixes. Otherwise, you're going to need to do a little bit of surgery. Best case scenario here, you'll land a mod that has tags that our elevated mods don't have, that you can just use harvest crafting on. Since our elevated mods are attack, damage, and physical mods, we'll want something with caster, any of the elemental tags, or defenses. If you have any of these mods with no corresponding suffixes, you can just use a harvest remove craft to clean the prefix off. If you do have something that's harder to remove, such as rarity or physical damage to attacks, don't fret. Your item isn't ruined just yet. You're just going to need to take a few more steps. In these bad situations, the first thing we want to do is get the item to the point where you have as few suffixes as possible. You can use the Reforge item Keep Prefixes craft to get it down to just 1 suffix, or just use Harvest Removes if you can. Once you've gotten to this point, you can use the Non-Influence to Influence craft. Assuming that your bad mod is the only non-influence mod at this point, it'll be guaranteed to be removed. Here you can see that the weight of hitting a suffix or a removable prefix is about 10,250, while the weight of hitting a bad prefix is 4,875. Sadly, this isn't perfect odds, somewhere around 66% chance. The other option is using non-attack to attack mod, assuming that your bad mod isn't an attack mod. Here you can see that the odds of hitting a suffix or removable prefix is 16,600 to 6,750, which is like a 71% chance of success. Depending on what you're crafting, you're going to have to check out the odds of different crafts in the calculator tab to figure out what's your next best step. This is just for this particular example. If this step fails, you're probably looking at either an annul orb or a bestiary prefix to suffix craft for the 1/3 shot of success. While it's not ideal, it's better than nothing. Now, assuming you've managed to clean up your prefixes or have no 3rd prefix, the next step is to clean up your suffixes. If you've gotten lucky and all your suffixes are easily removable, with Harvest Crafts you can just go ahead and remove them, and if you have non-removable crafts such as Dexterity or Mana on Kill, then we're going to Reforge. The Reforge, a rare item keeping prefixes, will allow you to basically Chaos Orb an item whilst keeping the same prefixes. Note that you want to craft a 3rd prefix if you don't already have one on, as this roll can actually add a prefix. At this point, crafting is pretty easy. You could keep spamming Reforges until you hit some 6 suffixes like high tier attack speed and a res, or you could just remove all the suffixes with harvest crafting or crafting prefixes cannot be changed, and then scouring the suffixes off. Then you just need to aug your res and attack speed on. Once you filled up your suffixes, you can then aug life. If any of your rolls here aren't good right away, you can use the remove add crafts to try for higher tier. If you're looking for something extra fancy, and probably on a different crafting project, you can even go for a 3rd elevated mod. All you need to do is get 2 influence suffixes, and then craft prefixes cannot be changed. This will prevent either of your prefixes from being either removed or elevated by a Maven's Orb, leaving only the suffixes available to be changed. Note that you do have to risk removing a mod if you want to risk elevating it as well. And that's it for my crafting guide. Let me know if it makes sense and what other types of tutorial style videos you'd like to see in the future. If you like my content, please consider subscribing and come by my Twitch stream sometime. Thanks.